Like I was very resentful, so I started rebelling at a very young age. The thing that I thought was an accomplishment at 11 years old was I wanted to be that vato. That's what my idea of like what success looked like. And being a young mixed race child, I was really kind of caught in the middle because I grew up in a pretty violent setting, I will say that. Mediation, I see my whole family sit down on both sides of a lawn table and basically got told, nobody wants you.
Junior on the beat, boy. Ya estás, podcast, boy. Let's go. Ya estás, no vuelvo para atrás, libre del Alcatraz, en la guerra tengo paz. Mis metralletas es la oración y adoración, salvación para mi nación, manifestar el reino es la meta. Puesta la armadura, que las criaturas andan duras de la dimensión oscura, mi alma se apresura. Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Ya Estás Podcast. I am your host, Fernando, aka FSR in Spanish, FSR in English. That's how people pronounce it. But yo, today I got a brother here who I really wanted to get to know his story. My boy Garrett.
What's going on, man? How you doing?
G. I'm blessed, bro. Blessed.
Bless you, sir.
Yeah. So I met you through Spiritual Homeboys, right? And which has been a tremendous blessing because through that connection, we got all of this. So without further ado, man, I know it's an uncomfortable seat to be in because I've been in your seat, you know, because I was like, yo, I can't be asking people to do something that I'm not willing and open to do. So
Sure. No,
we
100%.
want to start off with your upbringing, your story.
Now,
Obviously, I respect if there's certain stuff that you don't want to share, but the whole purpose is to see what part of your story shaped you, what experience shaped you, why you did what you did, and then obviously how you came to the Lord's feet. So, where you from, bro? I know you're from Chula, right?
yeah, so my family's actually been in Chula Vista since the early 60s. My dad and my mom's side, and I'm from South Bay, San Diego, but I've lived all over San Diego County, as far as Lakeside and in between. So, but primarily South Bay. I've been there for since I was 17, so it's been a little bit. Beforehand, I was born here, and then my dad, due to some personal reasons, wanted to move to the Deep South, so we lived there for some time.
Deep South.
Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had a very interesting grow-up experience.
Tennessee, okay.
Yeah, so we lived there from 1994 to about 2000s when my parents divorced.
Okay. So you were out there 6 years?
Almost, yeah.
How old were you when you guys moved down there?
I was about 2 years old.
Oh, so you were, yeah.
I was young, yeah. Born at Alvarado Hospital right around that time, yeah.
I was a neighbor of that hospital.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. So how was that experience in Tennessee?
I really don't have too many memories. I mean, I got pictures, of course, from like my mom. She was real good about like photo albums and taking pictures and stuff. So there's a lot of memories I relived by looking through old photo albums, but I was at such a young age. It's kind of hard to remember. And then poor life choices I made later on. My memory's not the best on a few things, but I put it back together slowly after I got clean and sober. So
Okay.
life's actually improved a lot in that aspect.
Okay. Is there stuff that you've heard, that experience that you went through that you don't remember?
Not really. I mean, location wise I remember, but there wasn't too much like I could tell you about Tennessee in particular that like really stands out. There's only a handful of memories that really stand out because they're like repeated events. We lived down the street from a river that was probably like, so we're in Logan right now, obviously. Where we're located to about where the trolley's at is about how far away we were from the closest river where I grew up. On our street, there was probably, maybe if I had to remember correctly, a whole total of maybe 5 to 8 houses on both sides of this. Yeah. I've been back and visited, and it's obviously changed, but it was definitely a different time in the 90s. So
Was it very rural and
yeah, yeah, we didn't have like a back fence, and it was different.
the houses over there are like so distance
Different.
apart? Is
Right, right. Your nearest neighbor is a few plots away. You're not like, like currently how Cali is just like you got people living out sheds and whatnot. You know what I mean? I mean, no disrespect to Cali, but but I'm just saying, but through and through, I'm a Dago baby. You know what I mean? I'm from San Diego. I moved back to Cali in 2000. My parents divorced, like I said. My mom's brother had a business called Cabinet Art in the high desert or the Coachella Valley.
okay.
So my mom was prone to move out there, and yeah,
Do you remember when your parents divorced?
I do.
That impacted you.
It was kind of challenging, to be honest, because I really couldn't understand why. It was kind of sudden, but there was some stuff that led up to it. I do remember as a child, like getting in the between both of them and seeing, some sort of violence going on. My memory kind of blocks out some of those memories, but I do recall, being in those moments. And my dad and my mom, I'm not sure if it was they weren't meant for each other. I'm sure they loved each other, but it just didn't work out, unfortunately.
Was there any substance involved, any drugs or alcohol?
I mean, like most people, alcohol and in that sort of nature, but my dad wasn't really much of an addict. I mean, a little weed smoking here and there from what I remember, but also I was very young, and these are all stories that have been passed down to me by other people. So it's kind of like I don't really feel too comfortable indulging too much on that.
Oh, that's cool.
But I do know that, they did love each other very much for a long while, and then it just didn't work out. I think maybe it was just like it says in the Bible, right? You got to be equally yoked, and I think that's what the cause was, is they just weren't on the same page.
Yeah. Do you have siblings? Or?
Yeah. So I got an older sister, Monique. She's quite a bit older than me. Then I have an older brother. It's a half brother, same as my sister. His name's Paul Jr., named after my dad, and then two younger siblings from the same mom, Caitlin and Brittany. So,
Oh, okay. But you're
yeah,
the only one from same mom and dad.
correct. Yeah,
So you came out here
2000.
you were 8 years old then?
Yes, actually remember the way I know it was around that time is it was my birthday, and I want to say I was turning around 9 years old. So, 2000 was a different year for us because moving from Tennessee, from a town which is still 500 people, to California where there is boatloads of people, it was definitely a culture shock. And again, the neighborhood that we moved to in the high desert was an up and coming suburban neighborhood at the time. So again, there was only a few houses on our block. It was all tract homes. So, it was mostly migrant field workers and, low to middle class, suburbia. It wasn't very much like the hood, but there was a little bit of trouble in the neighborhood, like anywhere, And so, yeah, I lived out there till about 11, and my mom in the meantime had gotten remarried, and I just wasn't ready for that, I guess, at the time as a child. She kind of moved on, I felt like, in my mind, too fast.
On the remarriage?
Yeah, so, and I don't think I was old enough to know then how things work. So it was like I was very resentful. So I started rebelling at a very young age, unfortunately. So
Were you still in touch with your dad?
honestly, not as much as I would like to have been. My dad was pretty much out of the picture up until that point. I'd see him probably 2 to 4 times every 6 months for like a weekend, maybe. And I feel like that was even a stretch. It was being 3 hours away. It was definitely hard seeing him as much as we wanted. And of course, you always hear back and forth. Well, if you weren't so far, or if you were closer, if you didn't move away, if we didn't get divorced, and no one really wanted to take ownership over why I didn't see my dad.
But that's, as parents, and I'm saying this because I'm a parent, I share this when I share my story that, I haven't seen my daughter in 2 years, you know. Um, and it's not because I don't want to, but now I found out where she works, so I'm gonna go look for her because she doesn't want to see me, but now I'm aware of where I messed up,
Right.
because before it was like, well, your mom, and
Right. No, I get it.
we're rebellious, like not taking ownership, and I think that hurts a lot of our children when we don't take ownership.
I mean, like I've heard before, like there's not a handbook on parenting, right? And it is true. However, I feel like, and I'm saying from my experience, and I know facts are not feelings and feelings aren't facts, but I want to say we are designed to improve over the course of time. So like if there's something that we saw in like a previous behavior from like a previous parent, and we don't like that or we don't agree with that, then we should do what we can to not repeat that cycle. Otherwise, we just basically pass it down and it becomes the next person's issue. Unfortunately, I didn't recognize that at that time.
No,
I don't,
we're young.
sure.
Yeah, and you're not expected to. It's like,
Right.
okay, go build me a bridge. It's like, wait, like what? I'm not capable of doing so.
Right.
It's to be understood. So that rebellious attitude of yours, did it keep escalating as you were growing up?
I mean, I definitely did not make the wisest decisions. I mean,
hey, they say don't judge a book by its cover.
my biggest thing that I thought was an accomplishment at 11 years old was I wanted to be that vato. That's what my idea of like what success looked like.
What inspired you to think that way?
So going back to how I grew up, right? My dad had moved back in with his dad, which was right on the cusp of an area known as South Bay, and then you have National City, which is like a whole nother territory.
So, quick question: your dad moved out here too?
Correct. So my dad, after they sold the house or however it went down, moved back to Chula Vista, where both my parents are originally from. And upon visiting my dad here and there, it's kind of like, you're like a camera as a human being. What you see is what you're gonna emulate in a way, right? And so I just would see it all over the place. It seemed like it was like I was drawn to it or it was drawn to me, one or the other. If you look for something hard enough, you're bound to find it. So at that time in the early 2000s, South Bay was way different than what it is now. And
in what way?
Well, I mean, the cultural dynamic, is a lot more, I hate to say it, but I would have to put it in that category of just street life. There was a little bit more trouble in the neighborhood, and there was definitely stuff going on, tension between different types of cities and areas. So
gangs,
more or less. Yeah. So, and being a young mixed race child, I was really kind of caught in the middle because my mom, from all appearances, looked white. My dad's got jet black hair, brown eyes, looks Mexican. So it was like, here I am, like, what am I, And my dad's mom, which is tattooed on my neck here, says Carlota. So how many white boys do you know with a grandmother
named Carlota?
I mean,
not many, bro.
Si me entiendes, Mendes? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's just.
So being what's it called? A mix.
Yeah. It was
is that tough growing up?
I was extremely tough because it was like, I'm not 100% white, so I can't exactly associate with these people as enticing as it was for a time. I'm also not enough brown, so it's like I don't exactly fit in there. And it's like there was hate on both sides, so it's like, what does a kid do?
Yeah.
And then I'm being raised by a single parent, in two separate parts of my life, you know? So it was definitely left up to my own devices to figure out who I was. I didn't have the attaboys, I feel like, weren't validating me enough. So I found validation in what I guess you would call as the streets or being outside, right? Because
The stripes.
right, you know, being outside with the rest, you know, and if you look for, like I said, trouble, you're gonna find it, you know. I grew up skateboarding, riding bikes like most kids. I was outside. I mean, I'm sure you can agree that one time it was like you don't go home till the sun goes down.
Oh yeah.
You know, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have Instagram, TikTok, none of that. You know what I mean? And for good reason, because man,
Bro, can you it's crazy how kids don't even know what life without
right.
technology is.
I remember having to remember phone numbers.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I to this day my mom still has the same phone number. You know, because man, yeah. So I moved in with my dad at 11.
For the same reason that you didn't agree with your mom's
Yeah, choice in men. Yeah, she had married a pastor, and I'm not gonna go too far into that, but it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of like a double life.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a very friendly guy, and a lot of people said good things about him, and he was in a lot of ways. But behind closed doors, it was not exactly the same. Was I a good kid? Not by any means, but there was definitely some moments where I had a lot of doubt in my heart for the church and God and all of that because of that particular individual, and then my mom co-signing on his behavior at the time.
Did your mom give her life to God? And
My mom was raised in church and she was saved at a very young age, but I don't exactly know why she was so dependent on another man so quickly. I mean, who am I to judge, right? Because I don't know what her reasons were.
yeah.
I mean, they were married for a time. They're no longer married now.
Oh, really? With the pastor?
Yeah, so my mom's been married a few times.
Okay. Wow.
I grew up in a pretty violent setting, I will say that, you know, with that being said, you know, and it really made me resentful because it was like, how are you going to teach a kid don't behave in this fashion, but yet when no one's looking, it's like, I really am not going to spare you from the beating. You know what I mean?
Right.
And maybe that's just something that was like the tail end of the 90s and we've gotten away from that. And I'm not saying that it's not okay to hit your kids, but there's definitely a difference.
Well, it's a difference when you spank to discipline.
Sure.
And there's a difference when it's like physical abuse.
Right.
And once you're lashing out your frustration, your anger, whatever situation you're going through,
Right.
right? But wow, that totally makes sense. And you know, I read a book from my mentor, and it said that sometimes we're looking for the ideal partner, right? Or
Right.
person, you know, to marry. And it said that that person doesn't exist until you become that person.
I agree.
So sometimes we expect a person for a marriage
Right.
to
Right.
to heal us,
I believe that. Yeah.
to transform, to for us to be happy and fulfilled and get all this pleasure. But that's our job. Like no one outside of us can do it. And God is inside of us, right? So God can
Exactly.
obviously
Exactly.
can do the impossible, but we definitely need to put in that work and just going to
Sure.
church. Like you can go to church, you can read your Bible, you can fast, you can do all these, let's put it, church activities, but that's not gonna do it because those are external activities, not.
Well, I think people sometimes just check the box, you know,
Yeah.
and that's something that I carry heavy in my heart. I mean, today I do a lot of evangelizing and share my testimony, so I'm very grateful to be here. So thank you again for having me.
Come on, bro. I've been having you. When I met you, I was like, there's something about you that I can tell there's a trajectory, you know, and
Right.
when I saw how you express your love for God and for people, I was like, okay, this brother's legit.
I'll
So
that.
so you were putting in work on the streets to earn those stripes?
I mean, I can't exactly say too much about that. I definitely was a knucklehead. You know, I didn't exactly join a gang, but I was definitely involved with some shady individuals for most of my life.
Mm.
And yeah, and it was really more along the lines of like, hey, if we're getting high, it didn't matter if you're black, white, brown, you know, whatever. We're getting high, we're getting
It's
drunk, we're
it's
gonna
like
do this.
it's like
You know what I
getting
mean?
money.
Right. Exactly. It's just exactly, you know, and so I was just prone to that at a very young age. I mean, to be honest with you, if I can just kind of rabbit trail for a moment, I honestly believe that structure at a very young age can dictate how a person's growth develops at a phenomenal rate.
Oh, 100.
And for me, like I said, before I had moved, let me back up. So before I had moved in with my dad at 11, or just before 11, I was going to a charter school at this time. It was kind of like an independent studies, but not exactly. It was, I'm not quite sure how to explain it. It was a friend of a friend, right? And they had converted a movie theater.
Converted what?
Converted a movie theater. So they had taken a building and
Uh-huh.
cleared out everything that was once like an IMAX sized movie theater.
Uh-huh.
And then they just put a bunch of chairs and tables and called it a school.
Oh.
Yeah. I know that's kind of hard to like wrap your mind around. It's like the weirdest
So
like how do you picture that, right? Unless you're there.
what was the purpose? Was it for really educating kids
I
or?
can't really answer that because I still to this day I'm wondering what was the purpose.
You can't answer it because you don't have the answer.
I really don't. No, it was convenient because my mom was a single mom. She had just started getting into the relationship side of things, like I said. But in the meantime, she was providing for us, so she was working a lot. And so we would be at school for 4 days, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'd be off. So it was kind of convenient, right?
Yeah.
Well, the problem was, is I'm in the third grade, more or less, and I will never forget this. And I highly doubt he'll ever see this, but there was a kid named Pedro that I went to school with, and Pedro came across a Playboy magazine and handed it to me in the bathroom, and I knew what Playboy was. I mean, most people are not, you know.
And in third grade?
Yeah. So,
I don't think I knew Playboy in third grade.
I mean, it's on the page, you know what I mean? It's on the front page, you know, and I
Yeah.
could have said like, no, thank you. And I knew better.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it was like from that point forward, I looked at life way different. And I feel like that's what triggered my response to filling a void in my heart. Like I knew who the Lord was, and I knew I accepted the Lord early on in life. But with all the chaos that had taken place leading up to that point, it was really like the saying, the straw that, like the last nail in the coffin, or like the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, it was like lust, pornography, eventually turned into self-seeking validation from friends to full-blown addiction. And then it was just like a downward spiral from that point forward.
Do you feel like you lost your innocence at that moment?
I do, actually, unfortunately. I honestly, to this day, I work on that on a daily basis in not doing those things. And I take it very serious. I used to frown on people that would say like, no sex before marriage. I'm like, you're a square. Like, well, more for me. You know, like, and now I'm like, actually, there's some truth there. You know, like there is some stuff there that was actually there. And like, I did have a very solid grandma that was very keen on things like that, structurally wise. But at that time, I was already checked out.
Yeah.
You know, I was already there was no talking to me any sense. You could tell me whatever, and it was just,
Yeah. Well, the whole thing, the sex before marriage, and I used to think that way, right? Before I knew the reason why of the 10 Commandments.
right.
It's because God cares for us, you know, like
Right.
if you tell your kid don't do X, Y, and Z, it's because you
Right.
want the best for your child.
Right.
Now we're talking about our perfect heavenly Father who's telling us, don't kill, don't steal,
Right.
don't be jealous of others' personal belongings. Even though the adultery is part of it, but we're
Right.
like, how much damage do we have caused for just having those
Right.
relationships outside of marriage, you know?
We really don't know until we know, right?
Exactly, that part.
And I can't hold that person accountable for my life choices.
Oh, no.
But at some point or another, it's like sin once, that's you didn't know any better. All right. He'll let that slide. You sin twice and you keep going to that thing, he's gonna make you become a slave to it. Yeah, it's gonna drive you as far as it can possibly get, basically what you're looking at.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Poor choices.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, like I said, I got way into the art of escape at a younger age, 8 years old, 9 years old, full blown porn addiction. You know, figuring out how to wipe memory on computers and doing some not so good things
Yeah.
and trying to hide it. And it really taught me how to like be sneaky and like get away with things, or so I thought. Right.
Were you under the care of your dad at this moment, or were you back and forth?
Back and forth. When I turned, like I said, just about 11, I had heard rumor you could pick what parent you would like to live with at around that age. So with all the stuff going on, I kept persisting on that, and I kept saying I want to move with my dad. So eventually, with my mom not hearing the reason, or me hearing the reason, I should say, that happened. My dad worked graveyard, so picture it this way: he sleeps all day and is gone at night.
So,
There's no rules.
yeah.
There's no accountability. I mean, my dad was present. I knew he was in the other room, but I was very much told, do not wake me up. I have work. So it was like,
Say less.
you know, well, all right, fair game, you know? And so that's when it started to really like take off. You know, it was like go where I want, do what I want, you know, and at 11 years old, I had hair past my shoulder and skateboard in my hand, and that's what I wanted to do, like most young kids. But being around other kids that are always outside, I started to develop bad habits, and then it was off to the races. You know, smoking weed was my first vice before alcohol, and then once I discovered alcohol, it's kind of like they both went, they kind of married each other. You know, it was like without one or without the other, it was like I had to get one to get the other, you know, and like this sense of peace I kept chasing, right? Kept trying to fill this void in me. And it was like I would skateboard all day. I was responsible for getting myself to school. By middle school, I was walking back and forth through Chula Vista. We had an apartment on 2nd and F. I went to Hilltop Middle. My dad worked at Verona, and he drove that back and forth. So he had a Jeep at the time. He didn't want to travel too far gas-wise. So he decided it was a bright idea to move to Lakeside. It was not a good idea.
Yeah.
So 2006 rolls around, it's freshman year. I should have went to Hilltop. I ended up going to El Cap. And like I said, when you look for something long enough, you'll find it. So picture it this way. My own self without any tattoos. Shaved head, lokes, dicky suits. That's what I looked like. I showed up to what was mostly a white school, and these white kids, I should say, were looking at this white kid and going, who are you? And I'm going, I'm from Chula Vista. Yeah, it was.
How did that go?
Not good.
They beat you up, or?
It was just a matter of time at that point. I've actually got a couple of pictures where you can see I got some nice little shiners, and yeah, I made it till about November, and then well, I'm gonna kind of fast forward a little. So my dad had met a girl also moved on, and they had a pretty good, healthy drinking habit.
Mm.
One day they were hanging out. We were all hanging out. My dad was, like I said, very different from my mom. He wasn't saved at the time. He is now. And we were all drinking. I think we're doing lemon drops. And some conversation was being had, and she's going on and on about my mom. Now, me and my mom do not have a relationship, but that's my mom. You ain't gonna talk about my mama like that.
Yeah.
And I had spoken up and had said something to the nature of, like, watch your mouth, or I don't know what I said. I was 14. This woman, 5'0" Filipino lady, jumps up with a beer bottle, a half drink at Mickey's, and cracks it over my head.
How old were you?
14.
Damn. Wow. And what was your reaction?
Well, the bottle didn't break, so I tried to pick it up and hit her with it.
Mm.
But by the time that I went to do the same maneuver she did, which was one of these, my dad got behind me and grabbed it out of my hand before I could bring it forward.
Mm.
I mean, that was my reaction.
Yeah.
You know, I just got hit over the head with a bottle, you know, and I was definitely not anticipating that. And the police were involved, and my cousins were involved. They were there. We were roommates at the time. And then from that point, again, it was off to the races. I didn't know what was going to happen. I went through mediation. I seen my whole family sit down on both sides of a lawn table and basically got told, nobody wants you.
Mm.
You're too rebellious. And what seemed like a better part of the day went by, and they basically had decided, well, you're going to end up custody of the state if nobody speaks up.
Oh.
My dad didn't want to go to the lengths to get therapy and leave his girlfriend. My mom did not want me back.
Yeah.
None of my family was willing to step in. And so then my cousin, who was the roommate at the time, spoke up at the very last second and goes, he can stay with me. Sure.
When you heard that, what moved inside of you? Was it
Oh,
anger?
I was
sad?
full of disappointment, and I felt like I didn't belong, and I already didn't feel like I felt like I didn't belong. So it really started to make me understand that I didn't mean anything. And, like, again, if I meant something, why would my parents divorce? And if I meant something, why did this happen? And if I meant, and it just goes, you know, we start going down this rabbit trail. If I meant.
So did you feel a sense of unworthiness?
I really did,
Yeah.
which to this day I still struggle with.
So you ended up with your cousin then?
For a short while, we moved back to Chula Vista behind, I believe it's Eucalyptus Park, where the Target shopping center sits across the way from. Basically where I'm originally from, that same area. She had an apartment behind the YMCA. And I was there. She couldn't get me enrolled in school fast enough before my mom had given it a second thought and then decided, no, he's already spiraling downwards. I better pump the brakes, right? So I ended up back out in Riverside County. Like I said earlier, back in that same neighborhood. It's called La Quinta.
Oh, yeah, I heard.
Yeah. So I ended up out there. And it just progressed. You know, I hadn't tried to apply myself at all in school, and I was not the least bit worried about grades or any of that. I was just mad. You know, I was mad about just about anything that would upset me. I would hold on to it.
So you were very easily triggered?
I was for a time, and I wasn't able to express what it was. It just would come out.
Well, you didn't know, right?
Right.
You just, something triggered you and just,
Right.
boom. So it's emotions to the ceiling. And what about the addiction that was there?
So, like, my mom was very keen on, like, trying to keep me under her thumb as much as she could, because she knew the first chance of freedom I had, I was gone. You know, there was no telling what I was going to do. And I still found ways to get high, you know, and I still, again, like a homing beacon, would find people that were like me. You know, I was drawn to the Chicano gang culture, and that's like what I've always been attracted to, unfortunately. And not unfortunately in the sense like I regret it. I mean, to some degree I do, but I'm saying
The bad side of it.
the bad side of it. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, and so I mean, I had solo jeans. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the Panzer. You know what I mean? Like I was,
stuff.
you know, right? You know, exactly. Yeah, but they're not solo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, the thumbtack and the, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, you had to do like
I still have some pictures where I have
the pin right
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the side of the shoe so it could stick.
right, you know, and I still have pictures where like I had my first pair of Cortezes, right, and they don't even make them anymore. They're all white with like the blue swish, navy blue, and I remember then I was like, nobody has these. I want these ones,
Yeah.
and I never seen them since. Ironically, it's like they just discontinued them, you know. But anyways, long story short, I would really like to get, you know, to the good part, right? So
Yeah. And let me ask you this real quick. Like the porn addiction, was that still growing as you
oh yeah, oh for sure. I mean, like I said before, if it's not addressed, it's just gonna keep progressing, right? And it ultimately will manifest itself in other ways, where it'd be like relationships or situations you're gonna put yourself in, unfortunately, you know, and you kind of lose this like false sense of reality.
Yeah.
You know, things that are what other people would consider enjoyable, you just don't enjoy. You feel disconnected, you know, and it's kind of funny because like I've been bringing it up with like a lot of different people lately, and now it's gotta be careful. Your phone's listening, as they say, right? It's like you seeing it all over, you know, your Instagram, Facebook. People are coming out and they're like, "This is a big deal," and it's like, man, it's been a big deal.
Well, nowadays it's literally right here,
Yeah,
click away.
right. You don't gotta go right,
Yeah, like with you, it was through a magazine. Through me, it was a VHS tape
right,
that my dad had. And
right.
I happened to found it, and the rest is history, you know. So, yeah, man, it's nowadays is crazy. Raising kids, I think, is more difficult now that
I believe so.
yeah,
I will say that.
you don't have any kids.
No, I do not.
Wow, praise God for that.
Praise God for that. I mean, I would have had a son, and I'll touch on that real lightly because it's a kind of a touchy subject. But I do have a tattoo to remember him by. I would have had a son at 18. Something I really has been on my heart though that I tell a lot of people is I'm very grateful for prayer warriors.
Mm.
My grandmother was a big time prayer warrior. Fast forward to about April, I caught my first juvenile hall case. 15 years old, I was sent to Indio Juvenile Hall. And it's kind of a long story, but basically I was not looking so good, you know, and the only person that I can physically remember that wrote me every day consistently, no matter what, was my grandma.
Mm. From mom or dad's side?
Mom's side.
Okay. Did you have a close relationship with your grandma? Or?
Not at that time. I mean, she really tried to be there for me, but I wasn't receptive to it. So it was kind of like I knew who she was and I knew what she was about, but I was so full of hate at the time that it was really hard to see past my perspective.
Was it because she was a church lady or?
She was and she still is a devout Christian, and we actually read the Bible every single day together.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes, ever since 2021 when I got clean.
Okay. Yeah, so obviously all this hate is
It was
you don't
really
feel love, right?
right.
You grew up pretty much
Angry all the time.
not experienced love and care and
Sadly.
nurture.
I mean, it may have been present in some ways, but it wasn't receptive, I should say. You know, my mom tried to provide a safe household, I will say that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the lights were on and we didn't have cockroaches jumping off the table, but needless to say, I didn't see it other than my perception of life, and I felt like I was being controlled. I felt like being forced, and I just was being punished all the time and beaten, and I just resentful, you know.
Yeah. So when you caught this case and you ended up in juvenile hall, how much time did you serve?
So basically I went straight to like a trial basis, right? So it wasn't even that I got convicted. It was just I just went straight to trial. I said no, not guilty, right? And I don't feel too comfortable disclosing it on camera, but it was pretty silly, the case itself, and it wasn't sticking. And so it kept going back. You know, it's like I'd walk in and they'd be like, "How do you plead?" I'd be like, "Not guilty," and they'd be like, "See you next week." And I'm like,
Oh, they were dropping it. There's just
"Yeah,
a continuation type of deal.
right." And so it was not looking good because the guy that was my public defender's like, "Look, like, let's just get this over with." Like,
Oh, they wanted you to plead.
they wanted me to plead, and I was like, "No, I didn't do that.
Mm.
I honestly did not do what I was being accused of." And I know everybody says that, but I really didn't. And one thing I will touch on, though, is my grandma used to ride me every day, and I got to give context, right? So Indio is kind of in the middle of the desert. She worked on like the farther western end, and where she lived was like southwest area. So it was like basically if this was like the juvenile hall where she lived was Cedra, and where she worked was like Lakeside.
Mm.
So she could have just been like, "All right, I'm gonna go straight home," but instead she'd go straight to the juvenile hall before she'd go home and drop off a letter.
Oh, wow. So she was very intentional.
Yes, very.
What did those letters mean to you?
Everything.
Did you feel loved? Did you
For
feel
the first time I started to notice someone noticed me.
mm.
But there's something very key I want to touch on, and it's the fact that she used to say this at every end of every letter, and it was Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the thoughts I think towards you, thoughts of a hope and a future, declares the Lord." And she would say, "God's got a plan for you, grandson." I had no idea what that meant, and it spent probably 2.5 weeks trying to figure that out. I thought she was losing it, to be honest, because I was like, this lady keeps repeating the same Bible verse like day in and day out. Like, she's got to have lost her mind. And then, you know, after seeing it for a few weeks, I was like, maybe I should get in this thing called the Bible.
Mm.
And that carried me through.
Wow.
I started reading the Bible, you know, not as intently as I do now, which I do pretty often, every day actually, but it really kind of woke something up in me.
So if they didn't convict you, how did you end up?
So that is a so the thing is if you don't get convicted and you go to juvenile hall, whoever you're in the care of, they'll get a bill.
Oh. So it's the system just
Yeah, so basically my mom got a bill in the mail according to my dad. She called my dad, tried to tell my dad to pay it.
and
My dad's like, "You are no."
yeah.
He's like, "He's in your care." So I had no idea what's going on. I go to court. They're like, "You're released." I'm like, "Wait, did I miss something?"
Yeah.
So back to mom's house, right?
So now what is that like?
My grandma stepped in for a time. We ended up living together, and she really did try to do her best to be that positive influence. We went to church. We did church pretty regularly throughout the week, and definitely every Sunday. And then I kind of bounced between both places. They lived a few blocks apart.
Mm.
I ended up going to quite a few high schools. I did graduate though, class of 2010, Summit High School.
There you go.
I was told by my high school counselor just to give up. That's usually not what they say, but you know,
Fortunately, it happens too often though.
you know, he basically told me I'm just gonna be a dropout anyway, so why even try? And that all I'm gonna ever be good for is gang violence and alcohol and poor choices. So,
Bro, that's something that I just cannot wrap my mind around. Why would you tell that to a kid?
right, a kid that's already struggling and has lost himself.
So when he said that, how did that?
Well, the beautiful thing is he said it in front of my mama.
Okay.
And my mom looked at him and looked at me and said, just like this, pointed at him and said, "You don't know my son."
Wow. So how did that make you feel?
Well, at first I was like, wanted to look at her and be like, "I don't think you know me either," but okay. You know,
It didn't make you feel good?
it did make me feel good though. It did make me feel good, but it was a funny moment because I was like, neither one of you know me. You know, it was like I felt so like off to the side, you know?
Did you know yourself though?
I did not.
Mm.
I was more concerned with how could I get the acceptance and the validation from my friends, or how could I be, it was like a thing. It was like people idolize, you're the baddest person on the street, or you're the baddest person in the neighborhood, or you're just bad.
Yeah.
And it was like idolized, and there was some sort of like excitement and stuff to it. It's like this macho, I don't even know what to call it,
Yeah.
you know.
So you were pretty violent then?
I just acted out in impulsive ways, you could say. Yeah.
Well, yeah, all that anger.
Right. You know, and then like I said, I didn't know how to express myself. So,
Yeah. Well, how if you were never taught how to?
right.
So, how long did you?
So I ended up
like
moving.
this?
I ended up graduating January 2010, and that's when I moved home back to South Bay.
Mm.
And I've been here ever since.
So when was that time where you literally had that encounter with God?
So when I had a first encounter with God, I want to say it was actually in a jail cell. It was some years later. I had been dealing with addiction for some time. I never got into hard drugs. I always frowned on it. I thought it was like not the thing to do, but then it was like you get around the wrong person, and somehow they just convince you it's the thing to do, you know, and you believe them. And 2019 to 2021 is when my addiction really took full effect, and I got diagnosed full bipolar schizophrenic manic. I went straight to politicking, running the streets, and doing the most. And it was bad. It was real bad. And at the end of it all, I ended up in a jail cell in county jail after the string of several booking releases, more than I can count. I actually got a letter from the jail saying, "We apologize, you're just, something's not right with you," basically, because they kept putting me in mental hospitals, and it was the drugs, but they were just not sure how to handle the situation. Right. And that's what happens when you do hard drugs. I was smoking PCP.
Mm.
So I was tripping big time.
Yeah.
And I just remember coming out of a blackout, and I just remember saying out loud, if there's a God, I'll do anything to never do this again.
That was in the jail cell?
In a jail cell.
So you were in and out of jail
Multiple times. Sometimes I wouldn't even make it home.
Wait a second. You would get released and you wouldn't make it home?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I would get picked up like on the way home.
For another crime or? Oh, wow.
Yeah. It gets pretty bad when they don't fingerprint you anymore. They just take you at level 5. And then they move you to 4, and then 3, and then back to 5, then back to 2, and then 3 and to 4. And
yeah,
I was a tornado, bro. Like I said, it was just, if you had drugs or if you had a good time, I was with it. You know, it didn't matter if you're from Southeast, East County, South Bay, wherever it was at, I was there.
Yeah.
You know, and
did you had any relationships or like friendships or?
And I was a people's people. It was like I said, you know, it's like I was everywhere.
People pleaser.
I mean, not a people pleaser, but I definitely knew how to find where the drugs were at, right? I knew how to like seek that out because it had been years leading up to that point. So it's like no matter where I was at, I was able to find it. Real easy.
Yeah. And who diagnosed you with the schizophrenia?
So it's now a Health and Human Services building, but it was right there in Old Town at the time, next to Rosecrans, the trolley.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they definitely tried to, I guess, figure out what was the cause of the symptoms, right? So they had decided that they would run tests and medications, and I was convinced myself for a time, like, man, I'm messed up. Not realizing it was the addiction, not myself. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like doctors, they'll prescribe you medications, and they'll sometimes have you even believe that you are sick. You need to take this. And a lot of people will go, okay, and they'll start taking the medication. They won't look at the side effects. They won't even take the time to even realize what they're even doing with their own body. And then they become codependent on that medication.
Yeah. But that's a whole different topic. That
Oh, yeah. No,
the
for
whole
sure.
pharmaceutical industry is so
Yeah, for
corrupt,
sure. Sure.
so jacked up.
So, yeah, back to the God story, right? When I said I'd do anything to get out of this, right? And everybody says it, the minute the handcuffs go on, oh God, get me out of this,
Mm-hmm.
I actually heard from God for the first time.
Wow.
And he had said to me, he's like, anything? That's all he said.
Questioning you back.
All right.
So you would do anything.
Yeah.
What'd you answer?
I didn't know what to say. All I said at the time was, I was like, uh-oh, I'm starting voices now. And I'm like, and I'm sober. I know I heard it. I'm like, what did I just do?
Did you know that it was God or?
All I know was God 100%. Because that very moment, I decided I was never going to get high again. And my life has tremendously changed because of that.
And ever since then, you.
Exactly.
Wow, cold turkey.
Yeah.
That was what year?
2021.
So that was not that long ago.
September 6th will be 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the temptation of going back or the cravings or.
Well, that's something I want to touch on real quick. A lot of people you hear like in Narcotics Anonymous, they'll say surrender, right? And that's in the third step. And that's kind of like the foundation and like the rule of growth starts to happen. I didn't really understand that, unfortunately. And it's real easy just to avoid drugs and alcohol. Anyone can avoid an issue. It's not hard to avoid something, but addressing something head on, now that in itself is an everyday challenge. So from 2021 all the way up until this past September, I just did a really good job of just white knuckling it. I really just wanted to do my own thing. I didn't really want to hear what an old timer had to say at an NA meeting or anything. I still had a lot of built up. I've got here on my own thinking in my, I figured it out up to this point, no help of anyone else really.
Yeah.
And right around that time when I took my 3-year chip, I had some pretty devastating news happen and it broke me. It really did. In between that time and the time that I got clean, I did have more of an in-depth understanding of God, though. I will say that. I did read the Bible every day from point to point. I did start going to church from point to point. And I did really take advantage of the resources I had, but I hadn't done the work on myself.
That's it.
So kind of like what you were saying earlier, right? Like I avoided the issue and I was going to church and I was doing the, all of that. And I was praying and I was developing some sort of relationship with God, but I wasn't really pressing the issue. I was like part-time Christian,
When you say part-time Christian, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, part-time Christian, like I'm part-time Christian. On Sundays, I'm Christian. On Monday, I'm hanging out with the homies.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm still telling everyone I'm Christian. You know what I mean? Because to me, it was, well, I read the Bible, that makes me Christian, right?
But if you're not doing drugs and you're hanging out with the homies for what reason?
That part. In my mind, I was convinced I'm doing them a service. I thought, well, if I just hang out with them while I'm not doing drugs, maybe they'll grasp onto that and maybe they'll change. Maybe they'll slowly start to see the things I see. But if I haven't done the work on myself and given them basically the solution, really, they're not seeing a change,
So you didn't change, you just stopped using?
I just stopped using and started reading the Bible, but I hadn't done no eternal work on myself. So like I'm saying, like going back to my point, so like with the 12 steps program that I started really implying in my life, it really does a deep dive on who I am as a person. And requires a lot of rigorous honesty and a look at self. It's a big reflection of yourself. When I got to that point, like I said before, about my 3 years, my life came crumbling down. Someone that was super close to me was out of my life, and unfortunately, for good reason. I was not anywhere in the capacity to be where I was at with that person at the time. And I ended up deciding to go to NA. And I said, I know I'm going to church here and there and reading the Bible, but it's just not seems like I'm missing something. And I ended up going to a Celebrate Recovery, and I met Ramon, who is still a friend of mine today, a good mentor of mine. And then without even knowing me, he just looked at me and goes, "You need to surrender to Jesus." And I'm like, "What? Like, you don't even know me. You don't know nothing about me. You don't know anything. I'm like telling you how much pain I'm in, suffering I'm in, and your response is that?" Like,
Yeah.
and it kind of rolled around in my head, and I'm like, well, the feeling's not going away, and maybe he's got a point. I've tried everything else. It hasn't worked yet. So I ended up really putting that into practice. I just got down on my knees after, a couple weeks went by of trying to still figure it out. And I just said, "God, whatever I'm doing, it is not working. I need help. I need a change. I need whatever it is this guy Ramon brought up. I need that. I need to surrender to you. I need to turn my life over to you. I need a change. I need to make this happen. Whatever it is you're asking of me, whatever I need to do, I'll do it." And it was the second time I heard from God. He said, "Time, money, and women." And then I went, "What?" And it was just like when you look at your kid and you're going, "Don't do that. Like, don't touch the stove. That's hot." And the kid looks at you dead in the eye and they're like, "What?" And you're like, "Oh, you'll find out." Same thing, crickets. I'm like, "What?" But the next day I had joy. Bottom line, that's how I know it was real. And even the fact that we're having this conversation, I know it's real. Because if you knew my previous self, I would have never talked to you.
Yeah.
I was not the type of person to have conversations at all with anybody. I was in my head for the last 25 years, worried half to death about anything I said, worried half to death about what people thought, people felt. I was depressed, suicidal, homicidal, you name it. I felt it and I couldn't shake it. It was just coming waves. So I'd numb it with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And when I surrendered to the Lord, my life changed. I had joy, I had peace, started hearing worship music. That's real.
Yeah.
And I had a sense of peace. And it was really ultimately the reason why I got high.
Oh, yeah.
That was the whole thing. It was, I didn't know who I was. I wanted a sense of peace. I wanted to feel content, love, and joy. And I didn't know how to get there.
Well, that's why most people, or I would say everybody gets high.
Right.
Because they're looking, or alcohol, or any sort of addiction.
Right.
It's just to escape that feeling, that
Right.
wound that it hasn't been obviously addressed and healed. Wow, bro, what a powerful story. So now you're involved with the Cricket Saints.
I am.
Shout out to the Cricket Saints.
Shout out to the Cricket Saints. Yeah, so those are my boys, man. I've been rolling tough with them for a little while.
How did you get involved?
It's actually how you and I met. So before I surrendered, Johnny, shout out to Johnny Walsh. Johnny was making shirts that said, the Lord's Prayer, as in heaven on earth, and so how it's said, right? And he had been putting it out on Instagram, and I seen that, and I go, I want a Chula Vista one.
So this is before you met Johnny, or you had?
Before I met Johnny.
Oh, so you saw it on Instagram.
I saw it on Instagram, and I said, I want one that says Chula Vista. I was not anywhere where I'm at now. Looking back, I'm like, that is.
And that wasn't too long ago.
That was actually this month, last year.
Wow.
My life has drastically changed from a few months after that point. September 27th, I fully surrendered, and my life's never been the same since.
Okay.
Yeah. So I met Johnny over buying a shirt. I was still very much carrying that machismo, tough guy, I don't know what
Yeah.
And Johnny was like, this guy is on drugs. It wasn't I was on drugs. I was just full of myself, you know, and I was carrying this false hope, false identity, pride, ego, lustful attitude, arrogance. And I started coming around and going to the Tuesday thing that
Yeah.
we and I met at. And, you know,
Spiritual homeboy.
spiritual homeboys. Yeah. And, yeah, I felt a sense of I need to be here, you know, for the first time. I was like, I need to be around the right group of guys for once in my life, you know. And so what happened is Milo got connected with my sponsor, Travis Melville.
Shout out to Travis.
Shout out to Travis and Milo for that. Thank you guys. So yeah, it was around December. I want to say like that right after Thanksgiving, just before Christmas, somewhere in that timeline. We had did an event called Heal the Hood, and it took off like a wildfire. We had shirts. We had it on. One of the homies had it on like a Dickies work shirt, you know. And it was like the first time the community had really started to take full effect in like the Christ movement. I feel like in Dago.
Was that at the collab or that was that?
It was. Yes.
Okay,
So
I was there. Yeah.
yeah, so Servants was there, Original Good Stock was there, Crooked Saints, some of the Dollface people, Johnny was there. There was quite a few people there.
So that's how you got linked up with Crooked Saints?
Yes. So we ended up linking up a couple times, and then eventually we started our own independent Bible study there on Sundays. And I really didn't know Travis too well at the time. Something told me to start praying with him and talking to him, and now he's my sponsor. So he's been my sponsor from right around the beginning of January to mid-January, and he's been helping me work the 12 steps. Let me back up for a second. So when I fully surrendered, I became like boots on the ground, right? I did a lot of service through the church and started really trying to do what I can to give back to society because I felt like I did a lot of wrong. So when I had seen the opportunity to share my story, my experience, strength, and hope in recovery, I jumped right in, both feet. There was no denying what I felt. There was no denying where I'm at now, you know, and I could tell anyone I've done it my own way and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, and you really do have to surrender. If you want what I have, which I'm sure you'll agree, you got to really be in it, you know, and it's a daily walk. It's a relationship. It's not religion. It's not just going on Sundays and maybe saying a prayer here and there when you want something. He's not a genie, you know?
Well, this is the thing is when we go all in, it's not a one-time thing.
Right.
You know, when we get married, I'm being married myself, it's not like I said I do and then it's just
That's it. Right.
it's just gonna work out itself. Like I have to be intentional every single day.
It's one of my
Every
favorite
single
words.
day.
Intentional.
That's it, bro, because that's why a lot of relationships fall apart is
Right.
because we just take the back seat and it's like, okay, well, things are just gonna work out the same.
Right.
I mean, they're just gonna work out. But if we don't put in any work, there is no working out.
Right. I say it all the time. Like if I went to the gym once every 10 years and I looked big and buff like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 80s and the 90s, well, then all the gyms would be out of business because I'd tell everybody my secret. You know what I mean? But it doesn't work that way. We don't see the growth in ourselves, and I still struggle with that. People tell me all the time, like, man, God's doing things with you. You're growing. And I'm like, man, I just see the same G in the mirror. But that's where you have to learn contentness, and that's when you have to learn, you know.
Well, you're definitely not the same.
I mean, I like to hope so, you know. I like to really believe that too, you know, and I'm really working on that on a daily basis. You know, I really like to think that maybe one day I can look back some years from now, just like I look back at my first, you know, time getting clean, because I really don't count that as clean time because I didn't do nothing about it. I just avoided the issue. I mean, yeah, I didn't pick up, but
I would highly disagree with you in there because, I mean, you didn't fall back, and that's
right.
That's a major step. Like that's something that not many people can say that
Right.
struggle with addiction, you know?
Right. No, I understand what you're saying, but I just, dislike having ego, you know?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with your experience,
Sure.
you know, like that sense of unworthiness. It's like, well, you
Right.
know, I really didn't, you know, do much,
Right.
but
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm proof that prayer works. I'm proof that going to church works. I'm proof that if you put God first, it works. I'm proof that when your grandma says she's praying for you, it works. I'm proof that when people try to put you in the right direction, it finally will come back around and you can't unhear what you heard. That's the bottom line. You know what I mean? And that was first coined by my mom. My mom, we have a great relationship today. Me and my grandma have a great relationship today. Same with my dad. My dad got saved in October, and we're all on our own independent little journeys, but life's turning around and I like to give back whenever I can. I do service all the time, and then really it's just a reflection of my heart in the streets. I'm still go to the same places like I did before, but now I'm really encompassing a different look at it, a different approach. I'm not laying in the dirt. I'm standing up next to that person saying, here's your help. If you want it, it's available freely to you. I'll show you how to do it, but I'm not going to put you on my back.
see, you're God's instrument into people's that not everybody can reach. Like you brought that kid, Dakota.
Yeah, Dakota, man, he's a good guy, bro. In fact, I got a lot of love in my heart for him because he and I mean, he got out not long ago, and he wanted a job at NASCA. I got a friend that's one of the plugs down there, and we talked on the phone one time, and he ended up catching a case, and then he got out, and then he ended up at the Crooked Saints house again, and I knew what he looked like, but I didn't meet him yet, right? And I come walking up, and I go, "You're Dakota," and he goes, "Yeah." I go, "We're gonna be good friends." And we've been talking every day. I give him as much wise counsel when I can, when he's listening. And he's coming quite a ways in the last couple of weeks. He's been with us, so I go over there a lot. I do what I can. Sometimes it's just a presence. We carry the Holy Spirit in us, and we are the church. So sometimes just hanging out with the guys. Like this morning, for example, I was super nervous, and I had a Bible study with one of the new guys, Saul, and he goes, "Bro, like, don't be nervous, just let God do the talking."
That's it, man.
So, I just, like I said, it's super hard it's like, I feel like I'm glorifying stuff. I feel like sometimes it's like I'm indulging in too much of that. And I really want to touch on this specifically. I know we're probably running out of time, but it's prayer works, and if we prioritize a prayer life and we prioritize setting aside time daily to read the Bible and really make that our focus, it will change us. Even scientists are coming out there saying, if you do this, this will change the rhythm in which you think.
Yeah.
It combats addiction, it combats, mental health things. And before I forget, I am completely clean. So I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't take any kind of pills. I have a hard time taking a Tylenol. I smashed my finger not long ago in a door, and I was definitely afraid to go to the hospital because my brain goes, you're going to relapse over a Vicodin. And I'm going, well, I'm not going to the hospital, and I managed to pull through it, but it was painful, and, I got off of my medications, and my doctors were all convinced I was nuts for doing that, but I got off of them almost a year ago in July.
That's it.
And am I under attack from spiritual warfare? That's another conversation, but you get the point. You know what I mean? And I believe that God has put both of us in our same area to really show the lost what it's about, to walk with God. And like, I was just so thrilled that you even gave me the chance to be here. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, because this is really what I'm about. It's not just for on camera or whatever, this is me all the time. And sometimes it's too much for people, and I get that, and I can respect that. But surrendering changed my life.
Well, that's it, man. And now thank you for being open. I know it's not comfortable talking about the past, and it's not to glorify the past. It's to give people understanding of why we do what we do, why we become who we become.
Right.
And then we give our life to God, then that's another struggle. right? Because like surrendering is
Right.
surrendering every single day. It's not a one-time event,
Exactly.
right?
And I say it all the time. I start my day on my knees and I end my day on my knees. I ask for forgiveness every day because we're not guaranteed tomorrow.
That's
And I'm so grateful. And I'm going to say this for the listeners that do have parents that are in church. Man, listen to them. You know, you may not be applicable now. It may not be like what you think you want to hear or you want to do, but like it is real. And my mom, even though we had a rocky relationship in the beginning, she did always drag me to church. And I can thank my mom for that because my dad was the farthest thing from trying to do that. So although I wanted to go that way, whatever that was, for however long I could, till I could go no further,
Mm.
you know, I just got really good at doing that for whatever reason, and it's not who I am, and when I started to really understand and unpack that, I started to understand there's so many layers to this life that we
yeah.
live, and once we seem to think we got one thing covered, something else is going to come up every time.
It's never ending.
No, it's addicting though, because you're like, oh man, I'm good at this now, and it's like, all right, now you're gonna do this. It's like skateboarding. It's like you got an ollie and I did a tray flip. Well, I just learned how to do the ollie. Well, you better learn it fast because it's coming.
That's everything in life. Anything you try to master, you just
Right.
levels every single time. So on that note, I appreciate you, brother. Love you for coming through and opening up. So
Of course. And again, I love you too, bro. I'm 100% behind you in whatever it is you plan to do next.
you've shown it. You didn't say it, you showed it.
I appreciate that, and all glory to God, man, because I wouldn't be here for him. And I want people to know for the record, one last thing. If you're still living and breathing, God's not done yet. That's it. I can't explain it more than that. Your testimony is not done. You may not see the light at the end of the tunnel. You may not see where you think you might need to be or where you're going, but the facts are still the facts. As long as you're breathing, God's still working on you.
Your story is for his glory.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. On that note, people, where can they find you real quick? Where can people find you on social media?
So you can find me on Instagram. It's gonna be G_Henshall, HENSHALL 1904. And if you want to keep up with me, you're more than welcome. I'm always around the town, man, all throughout San Diego. So you'll see me around.
Boots on the ground. Literally.
Boots on the ground, man.
All right. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you drop a comment. Encourage our brother here. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace, mob.
It's good to see you, bro.
Junior on the beat, boy. Ya estás, Ploscast, boy. Let's go.
Ya estás, no vuelvo para atrás, libre del Alcatraz, en la guerra tengo paz. Mis metralletas es la oración y adoración, salvación para mi nación, manifestar el reino es la meta. Puesta la armadura, que las criaturas andan duras de la dimensión oscura, mi alma se apresura.